I received a donation from viewer Konstantin Lizavets. Attached to the donation was a note with a request. I was asked to produce a video sharing my thoughts on a certain outcome in KOTOR 2, specifically my opinion on what happens when you're dark side, but you don't kill the Jedi Masters. In my mind, MC is an abbreviation for Master of Ceremonies, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Konstantin meant main character. Whether you're light side, dark side, or neutral in Force alignment, the Jedi Master confrontation scene remains largely the same, except for one line. The one line that Kreia says when she expresses her understanding of why the exile did what she did at Malachor 5, why she cut herself off from the Force so completely.
How one could turn away from such power, give up the Force, and still live. But I see what happened now. It is because you were afraid. It is because you had no choice.
What we need to keep in mind is that in either case, at the time of Malachor 5, the exile was a Jedi Knight, adherent to the religion's teachings. She defied the Council and went to war against the Mandalorians, but that was her defying the Jedi Council, and not necessarily her understanding of the Jedi teachings. Regardless, in that moment at Malachor 5, in one way or another, she ended up defying one of its teachings.
There is no emotion. There is peace.
In either case, the situation was that the Force bonds that she created with all those thousands of people who were all dying at once was going to kill her. The exile decided to hold on to life at all costs, even if it meant severing herself from the Force. Nothing is more valuable than life. While her motivation was the same, her reasoning was slightly different. I'm going to examine and give my thoughts on both the light side and the dark side versions, and I'm going to use Sigmund Freud's structural model of the psyche to help. In psychology, the structural model of the psyche defines three distinct aspects of the mind: the id, the ego, and the superego. People like to use an iceberg to illustrate the amount at which each one functions subconsciously and consciously. As you can see, the id is completely subconscious. That's because, as a simplified explanation, the id is your animal instincts. The superego is mostly subconscious, but not entirely. That's because that's where things you've learned throughout life that shaped your personality, like religious teachings, reside. The ego is the one that functions the most consciously, because that's the part of you that tries to mediate between the id and superego extremes. In order to understand what happened to the exile at Malachor 5, much like the exile herself, we have to disconnect ourselves from the Force. In a Star Wars universe where there is no Force, there wouldn't be any people on the light or dark side. There would simply be decent people and not so decent people. Due to the Force not being able to control the exile, this is what the player was determining throughout the game. Through the choices you made, you and you alone decided what kind of person the Jedi exile is, not the Force. Let's say that the exile was a light or neutral type personality. Kreia says that the exile was afraid. She was afraid to die. It sounds simple, but it's more significant than you may think. A Jedi isn't supposed to feel any emotions, let alone fear.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
But all emotions, fear, and yes, even hate, are perfectly normal human things to do, and we need our entire range of emotions. Despite their obvious drawbacks, fear and hate can also be beneficial. Whether hate or dislike, general disapproval of something comes from the same place. So if you're going to fight against something, you're going to need a modicum of this emotion that we've attached many different names to. I hate war and the effects it has on people. I refuse to support anyone who sees it as the be-all end-all solution to all of life's problems. I'm not going to that dark abandoned mansion to investigate. I'm afraid. God knows what might be waiting for me in there. Fear has heavily contributed towards the survival of the human race. The greatest fear of all is fear of the unknown, and the greatest unknown is what happens after death. In the Star Wars universe, it's said that when you die, you're absorbed by the Force and you become one with it. No one really knows what that means. Okay, I'm one with the Force, now what? Am I conscious? Do I float around? Am I in pain? Am I just fuel to keep the Force alive and that's why it's perpetuating these wars? So many questions that can never be answered, not even by Force ghosts, I'd argue. The exile defied the Jedi teachings because she was afraid. The exile defied the Jedi teachings by simply being human.
To kill Jedi, you had to be a human being.
Reverend said that to kill Jedi, you have to be a human being. Perhaps in order to kill the Jedi within yourself, you would have to do the same.
But in the end, he turned back to me, when he realized there was nothing more to be learned from the Jedi except how one could leave them forever.
It could be that part of what it takes to shed the Jedi mentality is to reconnect with your emotions, effectively reconnecting with your humanity.
Revan said that many Jedi have the capability to form connections to life around them, although few of them realize the extent to which this is possible. Recollection. I believe my master speculated that many Jedi did not fully form such connections because of their discipline, because they never opened their lives to the passions around them. I believe Revan termed it that one would need to be a human being to develop such connections. It is something that the Jedi Code could not teach. One simply knew it instinctively or not.
Let's say that the exile was more a dark type personality, which for a Jedi that may sound weird, but like I've mentioned before, being part of any religious organization doesn't necessarily make you a good person.
The teachings of the Jedi are a shell surrounding the heart of man.
I do not know when the Jedi ceased to be adherents to their code, but many did not tread cautiously, and many were quite arrogant when facing a droid, as if we were somehow beneath them.
Through the Jedi, you can attain power and status. These things inevitably attract the kind of people who, by their nature or psychology, are power hungry. If you roleplay a Jedi exile that is like this, then you can make the argument that she did not want to give up the Force because of the power it gave her. But like Kreia said, she had no choice. Technically there was a choice. She could have chosen to hold on to the Force, like the Jedi Council eventually did. But this would have resulted in her death, to which many would say that making a choice that would result in you never being able to make choices again is no choice at all. Thus, if the exile wanted to survive, she had no choice but to cut herself off from the Force. She made it very obvious that, whether light or dark, she valued the power of her life more than anything else. A very human thing to do, which is another parallel between this game and Rurouni Kenshin. After killing so many people, Kenshin took his own life for granted and didn't care whether he lived or died. This rejection of his humanity was limiting him. But this is an idea that has been explored in many works of media, including anime. From Rurouni Kenshin to Code Geass, people can consciously stop caring about their well-being. But like it's been argued in films like Ghost in the Shell, DNA might just be programming that stresses survival. Your body does everything it possibly can to keep you alive. That's why people can sometimes be so difficult to kill. It's mostly done subconsciously, just like with your id and superego, which could explain why the exile didn't even remember cutting herself off from the Force. What happened at Malachor 5 can be seen as a clash between the exile's id and superego, a clash between her nature and how she was nurtured. If the exile's ego could speak, and she was a dark type personality, it might say something like, "Power is a spectrum and comes in many forms. I know you want to hold on to the power of the Force. The Force grants you great power, but it's worthless if you're dead." If the exile's ego could speak and she was a light or neutral type personality, it might say something like, "Yes, you killed a lot of people, but you dying here isn't going to bring any of them back or keep this from ever happening again. The Force certainly isn't worth holding on to if you're dead. Your magical powers, your lightsaber, or the Jedi community isn't worth a damn thing in death. Your life is the most valuable thing you will ever have. So live. I'd like to take this moment to thank Konstantin Lizavets again for the generous donation and the idea for this video. I don't think I would have ever made this without you. Little by little, ideas came to me, even an idea for a different topic I want to tackle in the future. I won't lie, the donation helped. I was spurred on by the thought of, you have to do it, you owe Konstantin to try and to try your best. It took a while, but once I started writing, it just kind of bled onto the page, which is probably why I needed to do a rewrite. Still, maybe Shia LaBeouf had a point when he said, "Do it!" I'll say it again, Kreia's Conundrums wouldn't exist without that one email I got from Alexander Riley on Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018 at 10:08 p.m. I still have the email and I'll most likely never delete it. Konstantin, I hope you leave a comment below so people can give you some love too. Thank you again, and thank you everyone who emails, comments, follows me on social media, likes my videos, subscribes to my channel, or doesn't subscribe, but watches my videos anyway.